Good evening, everyone. Wow, what an amazing crowd tonight to take in Mastering the Art of French Cooking in Minnesota. We are delighted to bring you this program. A little bit before we begin. So tonight's event will feature a conversation with chefs Russell Klein of Meritage, Jamie Malone of the Paris Dining Club, and cookbook author and TV host Zoë François. They are going to discuss the influence of Julia Child, their journey as chefs and food writers, and unique stories from the Twin Cities food scene. Now, quick question. Has anyone seen the Julia Child exhibit upstairs? A handful of folks? Okay, excellent. So after this is done, we will make our way upstairs for the reception and for the exclusive viewing of the Julia Child exhibit. And I also want to note that the program tonight is made possible by the state of Minnesota's Legacy Amendment. We couldn't do these kinds of programs without that funding. I also want to acknowledge any members we have in the house. Do we have any MNHS members with us? Oh, fantastic. All right. Yeah, thank you for being a member. That is also drives the work we do, so thank you for that. Now, I just want to give a quick note on our panelists before we begin. Zoë François is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Zoë Bakes Cookies, the IACP Best Baking Cookbook, Zoë Bakes Cakes, and on top of that is an Emmy-nominated TV host. Russell Klein, native New Yorker, has more than 30 years of experience in the restaurant industry, and in 2007, along with his partner Desta, he opened Meritage. Now almost 18 years old, Meritage has become a beloved fixture in downtown St. Paul. And Jamie Malone, St. Paul native, was named one of Food & Wine's Best New Chefs in 2013, and in the same year received a James Beard Award Foundation nomination for Rising Star. Most recently, Malone created Paris Dining Club and Studio, and you can find Jamie at her North Loop studio, hosting events and creating new experiences for people who love food. And our conversation tonight will be moderated by James Norton of Heavy Table. Heavy Table is an upper Midwestern culinary journal published since 2009. So please help me in welcoming our wonderful panelists to the stage.
Yeah, I'm James Norton. I'll be kind of guiding the conversation here tonight. I'll be chatting with our panelists here and getting out of the way as much as I can while they talk about their connections with French cuisine and the legacy of Julia Child and everything that encompasses. You get into Julia Child at some point if you're doing anything with food, and her voice is so organized and so self-aware and so generous and so funny. And it's such a visceral connection, and I think we're going to try to talk a little bit about that voice. We're going to talk a little bit about that legacy and how it's playing out today with our panelists. And I want to start by kind of lobbing a question to each of you guys personally, and then we'll kind of go a little broader and all kind of converse. Jamie, I'll start with you. And, the mission for your Paris Dining Club talks about, and I'm quoting you here, the French way of life, generous hosts, beautiful tables. Expand on that. How does French cooking, how does French culture influence and guide what you do here half a world away?
Yeah, I love French food. We focus a lot on cooking French food. But, when I called it Paris Dining Club, I knew we wouldn't just be strictly French food. We venture outside of that, but I think what we do is we follow the sentiment that the French have around food and cooking, which to me is a lot about the ritual around food and gathering and how even just a cup of coffee is a ritual. And there's also a lot of permission around desire and pleasure in French just culture and cuisine. And so we try to focus on that too, because I think as Americans we can get a little bit too caught up in feeling that, desire or pleasure is something that we should hold off on that. We should wait. We should earn it. And
if
the French
are not functional, it doesn't belong on our plate.
Yeah. And the French are just totally the opposite. So to me, that's a lot of what that means and how we use food to kind of just mark everyday life. Yeah.
Cool. Zoë, you're an author, you're a teacher, you're an accomplished baker. Tell me about the French connection to the work that you do whether that's via the French baking tradition or through books like those of Julia Child or the Time Life volumes that I know that you're a fan of. I'm a fan of as well.
Yeah, my first connection to Julia actually happened way before I decided I was going to be a chef of any kind. I was 5 and started watching her show. Just when I first came to see this event, I walked in and had this like visceral reaction. You asked if it was a visceral thing to walk in there. It literally struck me that, how much of an impact this woman had on me before I was even aware of her, what she had sort of formulated in my head, the way that I teach, the way that I write, the way that I am on TV, has all been instructed by Julia. But it had sort of formed when I was just a kid, and it was something, a quality that she brought to it that wasn't about the food. It was about, I grew up on a commune, it was really chaotic, and she brought this like elegance and calm into my life as a 5-year-old that I always desired to have. So just like you, it's not always about the food, it's about this feeling. And so Julia has always had this presence for me, even before I understood it. And honestly, it didn't hit me until I walked into this exhibit how profound it was, because I felt it up and down my body in a way I hadn't expected it to hit me.
That's really cool. And it's funny you talk about elegance and calm. We're talking about French cuisine. That might all seem sort of stuffy or uptight or elitist, but that's not the deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. The first time I went to France was for my honeymoon in 1991, and I realized that French food is just food. It's what the French eat, so it's home cooking, it's everything. It can be a Michelin star, experience, but it's just food. The woman that I was staying with in France went out into her yard and picked up snails and then brought them in the kitchen and cooked them for us. And so I had escargot, but it wasn't at a fancy restaurant. It was literally out of the dirt in her garden, and then in her kitchen, and then on the table under this giant bay tree. And it was just like, not at all fancy, but incredible.
Cool. Russell, tell me about the guiding mission of your restaurant and how it connects to French cuisine, and how you adapt it to an American palate and an upper Midwestern pantry. Or take any aspect you want. That might be overkill, right? It's overkill.
Well, I'll take the last part first. We don't adapt it. As you said, it's just food, and I find that it's very accessible food, especially when you get past the pretension of it and what people think of as stuffy French food. And so a lot of our mission, such as it is to deliver excellent renditions of the classics. The thing that attracted me first to French cooking was the technique, and kind of the codification of technique. And I also grew up coming home and watching Julia and Jacques Pepin, and had when I went to culinary school, had the opportunity to study under Jacques Pepin. He was the dean at the French Culinary Institute when I was there. And it was that technique that really inspired me at first. And as I explored more, and as I went to France, coming out of culinary school, I spent about 8 months working in the south of France. What I learned about was what you guys are talking about, is it's really not about the food. It's about the people who are at the table with you. It's about the camaraderie. The food is almost the least important part of the meal, as it is in a restaurant too. I think the way we make you feel in the restaurant, the service and the hospitality that we provide in the restaurant are really kind of more important than the food is.
I mean, one thing that I experienced pretty viscerally at your restaurant, Duck à la Presse, and you say it's not about the food, and I believe you, but nobody else is doing that, right? I mean, that's a fairly involved preparation.
And it is. It's a classic. I don't know that Julie ever did that one on TV. That might have been a lot, but that is an example of that kind of classic technique. The idea of using the entire animal and honoring that heritage. All of that is what inspires me in the kitchen still. If I get to learn a new dish that I haven't made, we every year we do a Tour de France where we kind of explore different regions in the summer. And this year in the South, I came across an octopus pie from the south of France that I'd never seen before. It was new to me, after all, and I've been doing this every year and discovered something new. That was kind of a thrill for me after all these years to still find a new dish I had never seen before.
That's really cool. I'd love to dig into Julia Child's body of work a little bit and let you guys weigh in as much as you want, but maybe I'll start with you, Zoe. Is there a recipe from one of her books or something that she said on a show that caught your attention, or a way that she connected with her audience that really changed the way you teach, you present, and you write?
Yes, all the above. Well, it started with the show. I think the first thing that I saw her make that blew my mind was a floating island, which is a meringue in creme anglaise. And like I said, I grew up eating granola and growing everything that we ate, and it was all food for fuel and not for this experience that we're talking about, although it was a commune, so there was always a lot of people around. So she would always cook these elaborate meals and then sit at this table by herself, and I always envied that. Because I always had a million people around me. But it was just, so that was one of the things. Baking with Julia changed my life because that one came later. Once I had already started a baking company in college. I should put that in air quotes because I knew nothing about baking or running a business. But I did it anyway. Baking with Julia, co-written with Dory Greenspan. That book, I baked front to back, and it changed everything for me. I learned about baking through that book. And it also taught me how to not only move through a recipe, but how a recipe should be built. And so it affected how I then wrote recipes. And I would say that's true also in her television show. It wasn't like I went and studied it, but there was something so comforting and so joyful and so magical about taking these techniques that can be complicated, and she broke them down in such a real joyous way, but then also made it seem accessible. And that's the part, especially with baking, that I feel like people are so intimidated by sort of the art, or not the art, but the science and math of baking. And so I feel like it's especially true that there has to be fun in it. And Julia was always fun. There was always a mistake in it, and they didn't edit that out. And I thought that was the magic of her show, is that they left it full of all of those moments that SNL then, grabbed a hold of, and that we all know. But all of that informed how I teach, how I write, how I present. So really, it's all of her work.
And Jamie, over to you in terms of something in Julia's legacy or writing or recipes that's sort of changed the way you cook or you work?
Yeah, I mean, listening to both of you, I feel like we all have very similar, which I wouldn't have necessarily expected, but a lot of very similar takeaways. To what you said, when Julia wrote recipes, which was pretty revolutionary, she was talking to you. She wasn't writing a recipe on a page. She was talking to the person cooking. And I think she took away that gatekeeping, and that took away kind of the fanciness, the lore of French food, and just, I mean, think about how amazing this is. Like, one woman made French food something that was like accessible to every home in America, and just felt like, yeah, of course I can make coq au vin at home. Like, that's an impossible thing to do because everyone says, French food, I don't know, and she did that. And then also, Russell, what you said about like the codifying, and when I was in middle school, I got my first baking book, and I'm not a baker, but I was fascinated by how they taxonomized the food. And, there's all these cakes fit in categories, and I was just like, it just blew me away. And then starting to learn about technique and all of this and how everything is organized, like, I just completely fell in love with that. And again, that's just something that then Julia makes really joyful, because when I first started cooking professionally, I always felt like if you don't stick by the technique, like, that's totally wrong. And sometimes that's true, but as long as you know the technique, you have the freedom to cook well and to cook joyfully. But again, like, I think Julia kind of really broke down those barriers in a really special way that clearly connects with almost everyone.
Russell, I'd turn to you with the same question.
Yeah. I had zero designs on being a chef when I was a kid. Never really entered my mind at all. But I grew up in a household that appreciated food, and I loved coming home and watching cooking shows. It was Julia and Jacques, great chefs of Europe. That was a really fun one. But I think what she did that was so great for me was it kind of gave me permission to try, because she screwed it up and it was okay, And so I would try things for myself or for my family, for my siblings or stuff when my parents were out. Even though it wasn't in my mind at all that I would eventually decide to pursue this.
So it's almost a tension between that rigor and that formalism and that structure and this admission that, yeah, and we're also human. We're also people.
So professionally, I really appreciate the rigor, and I think that's what differentiates restaurant cooking from home cooking. But at home, it's really kind of the opposite. I really appreciate the fact that, you can make a mistake, as you say. If you know the technique, then you have a lot of freedom to go in any way. And I'm sure, you never cook with a recipe at home. I never cook with a recipe at home.
Oh, I do.
Well, bakers.
One of the things that Julia instilled in me was that the more you know and understand the technique that we've all been talking about, the more you can play. And so I really feel strongly about teaching people those basic techniques, and that's very French, the techniques that I have learned and studied and teach. In all of my books, I always have an academy where I put all of these techniques and I deep dive into them, and people can go to that academy if they want to. They can skip it if they don't want to. But I like putting that there because then people can make the recipes their own. If they have that knowledge, they can play with it, just like you're talking about not using one, but that's because you're so comfortable with it. But people who are just starting out don't have that comfort level. But that's the fun, that's the joy, that's the art, is taking that bit of knowledge and making it into something else. So I never want people to use my books, as they're written, but to put their own spin on it.
I want to move to another part of Julia's legacy, which is sort of opening this door between France and the United States and introducing this cuisine. And in your world, we'll start with you, Russell. You talked about maybe not adapting necessarily for the U.S. palate or for the local pantry, but there has to be challenges, dishes that don't translate, or things that have to transform. How do you bring this?
I don't serve a lot of offal. We try sometimes, but it doesn't go over great. So maybe that's an example of adapting a little bit. No kidneys and things. We do all right with veal sweetbreads. I find that when we put good food in front of people, most of our guests are not coming to dinner for an intellectual. Actually, they're not here to think about it. Again, it's about the people across the table. They're celebrating an occasion. They're going to a show, whatever, and they want to eat well. And I try not to intellectualize it too much. I just want to provide tasty food that's grounded in classic techniques, and often, again, our version of classic dishes, the best of our abilities. We try not to modernize them very often. We really want to honor the heritage of a lot of these dishes.
And Jamie, let me turn to you and say, is that also true for you, or are you doing fusion? Are you doing adaptation? Are you finding that trying to take these classic recipes into this world has challenges that you have to meet?
I would agree with Russell. Yeah, not really. I mean, besides some of the things, the awful, and the only, I think, adaptations we make is, I, much like you, really am attracted to the very old-fashioned, like how can we deep dive regionally, and find things that culture and tradition and landscape have shaped, and learn about them, and make them and enjoy them. It can be like travel, time travel. It's just, that's the stuff I love. The only adaptation we make is updating techniques or refinement. We have, different tools and things that we can use now. But besides that, no, we don't. And, Paris Dining Club, a big core of what we do is we, every month people subscribe and get these French meals delivered to their homes. And so we put a lot of consideration of what are you putting on your dinner table at home, because we're not setting the atmosphere for you as we would in the restaurants. So do we need to be more careful? Like, is it scarier to eat escargot at home than it is in a restaurant? And it's not. Like, people just love it. And we have our menus are customizable, so you can add things on it. So it's like we kept experimenting. Like, let's make the add-ons be like the weirder things, and then just the people who are really into it will add on. And it's like everyone just keeps adding on. We don't seem to have things that are too French that deter people. And I think we kind of have an interesting barometer of, like, you're not just sitting in our restaurant ordering, like you're eating this at home. So I think there's just so much romance, and there's just so much authenticity with French food, and I don't know, it's just, I don't find that.
And so you're not running a restaurant in quite the same way, but you're curating recipes and you're passing knowledge along. Do you find challenges trying to come from continental Europe to the States, and what might those be?
Well, okay, so my, not only do I write cookbooks, but I also have a newsletter, and I do a lot of content. And I am constantly playing with the traditions and melding them with new things and new spices and things that I'm interested in and have read about or have traveled. And so I'm constantly mixing things up. But the foundation is always traditional technique. And so I can add different flavors. I can add, elements of another culture or something fanciful or an aesthetic that is not traditional. But I do have that basic foundation for the techniques. So it gives me the freedom to play that way.
Jamie, I'll start with this possibly final question. We'll see, we might bounce around a little bit more and throw it your way. The future of Julia's legacy, where do you see French food right now in Minnesota, in the upper Midwest, in the U.S.? What's new? What's catching your eye? How is that legacy being continued?
I guess I mean, I see right now there's a resurgence of French food happening. I couldn't tell you why. I'm really happy it's happening. It's timeless. There's just always going to be cycles where there's a fascination with French food. I don't think that will ever change. And I would imagine, Julia's legacy, like, it's just steadfast. It's a timeless thing. It's uniquely very French and incredibly American. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that, as these cycles of people really falling in love with French food and cookery are coming back into, strong favor, she'll come along with that as kind of, I think she'll just always be the translator of French foods to American homes. Not necessarily American restaurants, but American homes.
But when you say resurgence, what are you seeing? Is it restaurants? Is it newsletters? Is it on television and TikTok? Or what's popping up that?
It might just be my algorithms.
It's always the algorithms.
It seems like everyone's only eating French food right now. It's really weird. But I'm seeing a lot of restaurants who are really like putting craft into food. And food is becoming less about showmanship and more about the craft.
It's definitely your algorithm.
I would say in restaurants, I think that there's, it's like a little bit less of, maybe less of a look at me, look what I invented chef restaurant culture right now, especially versus 10 years ago.
Well, it's interesting. The new Daniel Del Prado is going to be a brasserie, kind of a traditional style in a diner. Like that's kind of one of the ways the wind might be blowing. That's caught my eye.
Yeah.
Go
on.
I mean, there are, 2 or 3 new French restaurants opening now, and so we've been open almost 18 years, and we've seen French restaurants sort of come and go, but it always comes back because at the end of the day, the food is very satisfying. And there's so much, a lot of the look at me kind of food that was popular maybe 10 years ago, it's just not very satisfying. You leave and, but when you eat a coq au vin or a boeuf bourguignon or sole meunière, or any of the great classic dishes, you leave, you feel good. You might feel full and all, but it's a very satisfying meal. And at the end of the day, I think that's why it always comes back. It is timeless, as you said. And so it's never going away. I mean, it'll come and go in popularity a little bit, but one of the reasons that when we opened Meritage, beyond the fact that I was French trained and I love French food and all, I didn't know whether or not we'd make it, and I didn't know whether or not we'd ever have a chance to do anything else or whatever. And I wanted something that was going to stand the test of time. And I know that the food that we do, which is very classic, is classic for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am professionally compelled to eat out constantly. And when I get a free night, I'm at your place. So, Zoe, legacy. What are your thoughts on Julia moving forward?
Well, I think in my world it's a little bit different, and I spend a lot of time on social media and in that world. And I think a lot of the people, I'm so glad that this is happening and that this show is happening. And, we're also celebrating Jacques Pepin's 90th birthday this year. And that there's recognition of where we come from as chefs and recognizing, who the sort of foundation and who laid the path for us. Because I think there's a lot of content out there and people don't have the technique necessarily. They don't have that foundation, and it's part of why I love teaching so much, because I love passing that down.
I love that tradition that we stand on the shoulders of the chefs before us.
That we're standing on the shoulders, and so having the recognition. I've had so many mentors and so many people that have taught me And I feel like some of that's being lost in the TikTokization of food. And to watch a full video or to sit down and have a 3-hour meal with people, everything is so fast right now. So it's really nice to talk about this and to sit down and to remember that it's not always just about the food, it's about the experience. And I feel like the more we talk about Julia, because she is, whether these, I'm gonna say kids because I'm really old. But, whether these people know it or not, they have been affected by Julia. And so I feel like getting this out there and really singing her praises and recognizing all of the work is good for us, but it's also good for the people coming up after us.
Great. I think, Christian, we might turn to the audience for a few questions, if that suits the timeline.
That suits the timeline.
All right.
Grab your microphone.
Please, take it.
Excellent. Yeah. Questions from the audience?
There's one way up.
Oh, up at the top. Okay.
While you're running up there, you had asked about things that are coming, like mixing the French with new things. And I just have to point out from a baker's standpoint, Mark Hugh and Diane Mua are both mixing French and Hmong, in particular with those two, in such gorgeous ways. And if you haven't had their work, you must.
You spoke about certain dishes taking, because of the area it came from and the foods that were native to that area. And what would a dish you would do using foods that are native to this area in a French way?
I think a pike quenelle is a good example. We have walleye pike here in Minnesota, and we have crayfish. So that's a perfect example to me of something we can do that's incredibly traditional, but with very local ingredients.
We also do a pike quenelle. If I call it a walleye pike quenelle, we sell a ton of them. If I call it a quenelle de brochette, we don't sell so many. And then also we have incredible farms. I think the root of most good of French cooking, beyond the technique, is good ingredients. And at least in certain times of the year, we have incredible farms here that provide us with incredible ingredients, including fantastic duck and still some fantastic foie gras here locally, which we're incredibly lucky to still have, even though it's a smaller production maybe than it was a few years ago. Incredibly lucky to have that product here in Minnesota, because nobody else in the country really gets it.
I would just put rhubarb into a mousse and put it into a croquembouche.
All right. Do we have another question? Oh, yes.
This is just simple, but Zoe, you've written more than one book, to my knowledge. But Jamie, Russell, any temptation for books?
None.
I just picture myself in a few years after writing a book and being so embarrassed by what I thought I knew.
Oh no. I'm actually writing my 11th book. So what wasn't mentioned is that I have a series of Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day books that are out there as well, and the next one will be about pie, which is probably why I'm thinking about rhubarb. So.
Describe you as prolific.
Yeah.
It just happened. I don't know.
All right. right, do we have another question?
We've talked about food, but food's best friend is wine. What are your opinions about wine?
I like it. I wish people would drink more of it. One of the things that's hurting restaurants nationwide right now is that people are drinking a lot less wine. A lot less everything, but a lot less wine in general. We see it in our restaurant. I'd like to think that that's another one of those cyclical trends that'll come back. But it's all part of making a great table with your friends and family. It doesn't have to be a fancy wine, but wine and food belong together.
Excellent. Do we have another question from the audience? Down here, yes.
Going back in time, if you were invited to Julia's home for dinner, what dish would you most desire for her to make for you, and why?
Mine is beef bourguignon, just because that was the very first non-sweet thing that I ever made out of her. I was a vegetarian for a very, very long time, and that was what broke it. So yeah.
I have one of Julia's cookbooks, and it's called Julia and Friends. Yeah, it's such a great one, and the whole premise is these groupings of menus, designed for hosting, which I think just the idea of a book designed around hosting is so interesting and cool. So I think just anything Julia wanted to cook and see how she put a meal together would be really fascinating.
I would have to just go with anything she chooses to cook is going to be good for me. But for some reason, I have this. One of the episodes I remember most is the lobster thermidor, and I don't really know why I remember that so well, but that's what pops into my head.
This isn't as much as a question as a comment, but when you talk about getting together, I am fortunate to have a niece in Milwaukee, and her good friend, whose husband hunts, it's like Widow's Weekend, hunting season. Well, she started a Julia Child dinner the first Saturday of hunting season Saturday night, because the guys are all out hunting. So she got her foodie friends together. And this is a phenomenal event that I've been fortunate enough to go to Milwaukee for 15 years for it. So think about it, folks. It's something you might want to do at a certain time. And she does her menus out of different books. And this year we are celebrating Jacques Pepin's 90th and working out of that. So it's just something that you can embrace as well.
This is primarily for Jamie. I'm a little bit of a fangirl with my husband over here. But Jamie, I just am interested in hearing, moving from the restaurant to Paris Dining Club, how did that reshape or re-inspire your creativity with French food, or what did it open up, like realms with the home dining experience? Kind of what did that inspire within you that maybe wasn't as accessible in the restaurant?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm also a fangirl of your fur coat. There's one main thing, and it's when you're in the restaurant, there's a million moving parts, and you can have these ideas that we're going to do this dinner, or I'm going to deep dive into this, or I'm going to really work on the best beef bourguignon and put it on the menu, and sometimes you get to 30% of that vision, sometimes you get to 80, you almost never really get to, you almost kind of like your passion gets robbed from you a little bit in restaurants, it's just, you're just kind of keeping this thing going. And so one of my thoughts when I decided to start Paris Dining Club was we do one menu a month. And so we have a whole month to we write menus about 3 months in advance. So we have all of this time to deep dive. Sometimes menus are based on regions. We actually just recently did one based on Julia Child. But we get to deep dive into the topic, and so we do a lot of content around it too, so we get to have fun with that. Like, we get the chance to internally be intellectual about it. And that doesn't need to be, for the consumer necessarily, but like for ourselves. Like, I have this refreshed opportunity to like really take the time to explore my passions, which I think I had really kind of been missing for a while. And I think it's, we do a dinner party guide. Like, it's like very multifaceted how much we get to explore each month. So that's what I pictured for not just me, but, I kept a lot of my same team from the restaurants, so the chefs who still work with me, and other people on the team, like, that's what I envisioned for us, and we're kind of living that, and it's like really, really fun. Yeah, thank you for asking that question.
So how do you keep it alive? So where do you draw inspiration from so that you don't become more stale in that? And Jamie, I really love your stuff. We've been members of the dining club since I think it started, and we love it. It's like our one date every month. And it's wonderful. I love it. And I love how you show us how you get to your inspiration, but I'm curious about the others and like how do you, especially having a restaurant for 18 years, how do you keep that fresh? How do you keep that from being stale? What are the inspirations you draw from?
I'd say travel is huge for me. Often to France, but not always. This year I was in Thailand, and that was magical and incredibly inspiring. And obviously not terribly applicable from a culinary standpoint, but it didn't really matter. It was so vibrant, and the flavors were so vibrant. Travel, more than anything, inspires me. I still read a lot of cookbooks, new ones, old ones. I still think about food a lot. And look, 18 years, if I'm being honest, it wavers at times. But like anything else, you just kind of keep plowing through it. And like Jamie said, sometimes you're just kind of keeping the machine going, feeding the beast. But it always comes back, and anytime I travel, it inspires new thoughts.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm going to Paris next week. I'm doing a food and baking tour in Paris, and I've spent a bunch of time in Italy, and as much travel as I can get, not only to eat the food, but also to slow down and enjoy that culture. And that totally impacts the way that I cook and think about things, and inspired. And also eating at restaurants is a huge one for me. And I have a probably 1,000 cookbook collection, so I'm just constantly in them.
Well, everyone, please join me in a round of applause for our panelists.